They have clippers on the moon. They have clippers on the moon. Hello everyone, David here. So you knew this day was going to come, just like one of our characters said in the show, and it's almost like they were kind of self-aware. Being that it's a Marvel property, and being that it's one that is semi-quasi tied into one of my beloved series that's currently on TV right now that I'm hoping continues on because of how much of its quality has increased over the years, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I feel like I was morally obligated to at least give Marvel's Inhumans a chance and at least give you guys my opinion on the season, or at least the series premiere that was actually a two-parter, and it was with commercials about 2 hours, so without commercials about an hour and a half long episode. And one of the big gimmicks is that this hour and 20-ish or so episode of Inhumans was actually not only filmed with IMAX cameras, but it debuted back on September 1st in IMAX theaters for a limited time. And considering the preliminary reception of the show, let's just say that no, I was not going to shell out $15 for the ticket, but I was still going to give it a chance once it came on TV. Finally, it came to ABC. I watched the episode, and now here are my thoughts on Marvel's Inhumans, which is created by the same guy who created Iron Fist. Jesus fucking Christ. And if you needed a refresher, Marvel's Inhumans tell the story of what is ultimately called the Royal Family within the Marvel Comics, which is basically this group of people led by King and Queen. The King is Black Bolt and the Queen is Medusa, and they lead these people called Inhumans, who are like partially human. At the same time, they have some kind of code within their DNA that allows them to have special abilities, but of course that separates them from the regular humans. And they take refuge in the city of Adeline, I think it's called, that's cloaked within the surface of Earth's moon. And the biggest debacle here is that the brother of Black Bolt named Maximus, played by Iwan Ramsey from Game of Thrones. You know that face. You're never gonna forget that face and that Wiener Schnitzel. He's kind of leading like a revolt against Black Bolt because he's like, yo, we are just super fucking cramped in this one area. That's pretty, I'm paraphrasing here, but they're pretty much suffocating themselves within the moon. So it's him who says, you know what, it's time to go back to Earth and actually popularize it and actually trying to save our people. Whereas Black Bolt's just like, no. And that's kind of where our drama kind of stems from, because there's this whole political fight where one wants to be king over the other, and then there's some kind of coup where people get betrayed and stuff like that, and that's kind of what the pilot entails. Maximus trying to rise to power, whereas Black Bolt and the rest of the royal family get exiled to Hawaii. Gee, what a convenient place to be exiled to, isn't it? There's some potential here. There are some little nuggets, and I always try to look for things like this. Even in Iron Fist, I was looking at different characters and stuff like that where I was like, you know, maybe this little thing could work, and then as the episode, not even the show, but the episode progressed, I was like, no, you didn't do it. What I told you, you could have easily done, you did not do it, and that's the same fate that Inhuman suffers. And I'm starting to see a correlation in the form of Scott Buck. I think we need to get this guy away from Marvel as soon as possible, because some of the problems that plagued Iron Fist I saw happening again here in Marvel's Inhumans. And the best way that I can summarize these problems is that what initially could have been very interesting character plot elements get either rushed or get condensed within the first episode here, or at least the first two episodes, in a matter of an hour and a half. Let's take a character that I think is a perfect example, and that is Maximus. His rise to power to becoming king and becoming ultimately the villain, the main central villain of this entire show. That's ultimately what the show's trying to cater to. What would have been much more interesting is if he was still kind of playing the part of brother and still trying to kind of be loyal and understanding to where Black Bolt is coming from, but instead by the end of the show, they're already giving him the music like dun 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 dun, and everybody gets exiled over to Hawaii. That would have been much more effective if that happened like halfway through the show, so that during this first half of what, 8 episodes, we can learn more about these characters and we can feel for them, because tragic things happen to these characters that the show's trying to make me feel for something for them, and I feel nothing because I barely have seen them. Another good example is Black Bolt and Medusa. They have some tragic things that either happened in their past or they happened to them in this episode that ultimately to me is really intriguing, but the execution is done poorly. Black Bolt, there's a really quick flashback to how he discovered his power and how dangerous it can be, and I laughed. I shouldn't have laughed. It wasn't meant to be a moment of laughter, and yet it came off comedic more than anything. And then Medusa, who I think is a very powerful character, and I think she could be very fleshed out to be not only a very empowering female character, but also one of the stronger characters of the show. She just doesn't have enough screen time to really break out of what she could be, except for that one character that's just very archetypal, especially with something that they do to her that felt more like a business decision rather than something that can tragically happen to the character, which leads me to the Clippers on the moon. Let's just say that I think the budget eventually kind of got to them. They're like, nope, we gotta get rid of this. Even if the effects weren't even that great to begin with. Speaking of effects, the one ace in the hole that the show could have had was Lockjaw, which is the beloved giant-ass bulldog that's able to teleport people from left to right to different locations, who's got a really cool power, and he has a very charming and very cute design, but that's of course because I'm biased because I love dogs. That aside, the effects on him are rather terrible, especially when he's with another human, and that human, or human character at least, you know, that physical person that's actually there, an actor, is never able to match the eye line with the dog. So it's always like, if you can crop out the effect in your head and visualize the shot without the effect, then you got a problem. And while we're on the subject of Lockjaw, he's ultimately commanded by this girl named Crystal, and the acting was very passable from almost everybody. Even Black Bolt, who started off kind of just dull with his face, but over time he kind of learned to loosen up, and he's able to, the actor Anson Mount, realized almost halfway through that he's like, okay, I can't talk, so I need to use my face to elicit emotion. And he kind of grew on me a little bit, especially as time went by, and we kind of went with that somewhat fish out of water element with both him and also Medusa, but they never really paid off. And even him, even Gorgon, it meets up with some surfers, it was like really weird and awkward. It never felt to me like genuine. But the biggest culprit is this girl named Crystal, who commands Lockjaw, who's got the giant-ass bullseye on the back of her fucking head. And she is terrible. This is the worst acting I've seen in a while. And like I said, I made it to the end of Iron Fist, and that show had its fair share of bad acting, especially from Danny in that final episode. He's like this. This girl is even worse. She's, in my opinion, even worse, and the less we see of her, the better. But I know that that's ultimately going to become the bane of my existence if I should continue to watch this show, because Jesus. The dialogue was bad, the action sequences were very uninteresting and very unconvincing. I mean, there's no way that a white man in a suit like that is going to be beaten up that bad by the police. And then you got the whole hookup with the IMAX. Of course, I saw this on TV, so that IMAX doesn't really cater to me, it doesn't really apply whatsoever, but there's certain shots where you can clearly tell they're really trying to glorify the wide angle lenses of these IMAX cameras, and then all I'm seeing is the nozzle of a gun, and it's very uninteresting. Like, they don't even utilize that very well, because this show has nothing really standing out for it, whether it be on a technical level by how it looks with the visual effects or the cinematography. Although I think I will give some credit over to the set designers who created some of these locations for Adeline, because there is some very intricate design work when it comes to some of the layouts, as well as the throne room. There's some statues that I was actually paying attention to. I was like, hey look, it's like characterizations of these characters from the comics that had like a design to them that looked more in tune with the comics. I think at one point I even saw a statue of Black Bolt with this iconic mask, and I was like, okay, that's actually rather cool. But once we move away from the royally influenced buildings, we go over to some rather drab locations that are supposed to be Adeline, and often Maximus talks about how people are suffocating and people are not necessarily, you know, are overpopulated and we can't really thrive here. And yet I never get the sense that that's happening, because I only see a couple of locations. I never get the feel that these people are suffering or these people are in bad conditions. They just look like they're being worked, and that's it. And you need to really pay attention to your universe. And now at this point, I don't even know if that's going to matter, because we're going to be cutting back to Honolulu with these characters who have not now been separated throughout Hawaii, because hey, look, we can only keep these sets for a limited amount of time. We got to jump onto location. And speaking of which, the editing, it's just really bad and really jarring, because there's no proper sense of segue. One minute we have this rather interesting action scene where these two characters at the very beginning are being chased, and then we cut to Medusa and Black Bolt having sex. There's even a subplot that apparently wasn't even in the IMAX showing, and that is of this Felicity ripoff from Arrow who works with NASA, and she's trying to figure out what strange things are happening on the moon, and that kind of goes nowhere, at least in this pilot episode. It might go somewhere in the preceding episodes, but nothing makes me go, oh yeah, I want to see more of that. But I don't want to end the review on a complete shit note, because I do think that there's a couple of interesting things. Some of these characters have the potential to really hook me if the show continues forward and they're able to learn from their mistakes. Like I said, towards the end, Black Bolt was winning me over because at first he was very stoic, very kind of by the numbers, and then once he got to Hawaii and he was acting through that fish out of water element, he was really winning me over. He was actually making me laugh. I was like, okay, this is actually rather endearing. Medusa could be a very powerful character that I can root for, and these two can maybe have some of their moments that involve some of their powers, or could have like this buddy cop type of thing with each other that they kind of hint at the beginning of this episode, but they never really follow through with it again, because there's just too much going on. At the same time, some of that chemistry could be polished up. And then Maximus could be a compelling villain because he's the only human amongst this set of people that have superpowers. So whenever somebody emerges that's just like him, who's a regular human and doesn't seem like he has his powers, he goes up to them and he's like, hey, it's gonna be okay, it's gonna be problem. And I'm like, ooh, there's some sympathetic levels going on right here. That's actually rather interesting. And then there's a scene where they make him out a little too sleazy, like back to the Ramsey days. And I'm like, why is this necessary? It really isn't. You could have cut this out and kept him being a compelling villain. But again, they're rushing to get him on that throne so that he can twirl that beard that he's got going. And personally, the very last thing that I found really interesting were the little connections here and there to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. There's a couple of mentions from the Terrigen transformation that a couple of kids undergo at the very beginning of the episode, to even a mentioning of the water supply pollution that happened in season 3 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. back on Earth. So I thought that was actually rather cool that they mentioned that and kind of connected it. So that was very interesting. But then the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, yeah, I could really use some season 5 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. right now rather than this. I think we all should have known that maybe this wasn't going to be one of the best things to come out of Marvel, especially because of its troubled past, going from being an actual movie to be under the Marvel Cinematic Universe in, I believe, 2018 or 2019, to being scrapped altogether and disappearing from the timeline, and now being brought back seemingly from the dead in TV show format, especially under the guide of the guy who created Iron Fist. Maybe we should have known better. And so far, it looks like they just missed the mark completely. And maybe, just maybe, they'll redeem themselves with their second episode, because sometimes a show can only be as good as its second episode, not necessarily its pilot. So I'm willing to maybe give it one more go, but for now, I can honestly say that the beginning of the show is in some troubled waters. So I'm going to be giving Inhumans episode 1 and 2, apparently, a very low 6 out of 10. The only reason why it's passing with a 6 is because some of that intrigue that I managed to dig very deep within the characters, as well as the connections to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But besides that, here's to hoping that Inhumans gets better along the way, because some shows have proven to do so. Yeah, Clippers on the moon! So if you guys have seen Marvel's Inhumans first episode, or first 2 episodes, however you want to consider it, please let me know in the comments what you guys thought of the show. I kept it spoiler free this time, so I would appreciate if you guys kept it spoiler free, only because it is the beginning of the show. But if I should continue to review the show, which right now I honestly don't know if that's ever going to happen, I will continue on with spoilers, because then I have to get a little bit deeper into the story and exactly what is going on, so that then I can give my honest opinion about it. So please keep it spoiler free with your thoughts and opinions of Inhumans in the comments. Make sure you like and share the video, and don't forget to subscribe to stay tuned for those possible Inhuman reviews, some of which could be entertaining, because hey, who knows, I might get really pissed off. And also, in case you guys were wondering why Spider-Man is like this over here, I do have something cooking in the works that I'm very excited and very anxious to bring you guys, and I'm hoping you guys will enjoy it once it does go up. So stay tuned for that, and you can do so by hitting the subscribe button if you're brand new. And that's really about it. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys all next time. These actors that are brimming with talent are turned into pieces of wood. The script even tries to give them some witty banter, and yet, because of how monotone they are, it just doesn't work.
Tell me about your dream.
Emote, you left testicle, emote.